Urgent. This is game over for the Russian generals. Zelensky has outplayed the Kremlin hard. Putin has accepted Kyiv's ultimatum. Ukraine is dictating its own rules, turning Putin's truce into a deadly trap for Russia. Caucasian revolt, farewell Moscow. Ukraine has flipped the chessboard. Yerevan and Baku are undermining Putin. The Kremlin is losing everything now due to Kyiv's decision. Putin is in a trap. His own security forces are preparing a major crackdown. The leader is cornered. The countdown has begun. The finale is closer than you think. Red Square is in the crosshairs. Armed forces began their parade rehearsal in Moscow. A fiery surprise for Putin awaits. More in our report. Hotspot. Shock ceasefire. Zelensky outplayed the Kremlin and dictates the terms. While Moscow prepared for parades, Zelensky slammed the table and set conditions that panicked Russian generals. What double trap is lurking behind the scenes of the negotiations, and what will all this mean for Moscow? Watch. A truce, but not on Moscow's terms. While Russia is preparing for May 9th, Kyiv makes a move and breaks Putin's scenario.
Zelensky responded to Putin's proposal for a ceasefire. Kyiv is introducing a silence regime starting from May 6th.
Earlier, Moscow announced a unilateral ceasefire for May 8th and 9th. At the same time, Kyiv emphasizes that Ukraine has not received any official ceasefire proposals from the Kremlin.
At any moment, we could have expected a corresponding statement from either Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, or accordingly, spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, emphasizing, let me stress, that there is currently no formal or official proposal from Putin. The second major trap involved the fact that if the Ukrainian president were to officially agree to this ceasefire, it would accordingly significantly undermine and diminish the political agency of the Ukrainian president himself.
After all, the Ukrainian side cannot reject this proposal, and this is where the third trap lies.
Russia is trying to and will take the opportunity to accuse the Ukrainian side of being incapable of reaching agreements. In other words, this will be used as an argument to make an appeal to the United States.
In contrast, Ukraine quickly seized the initiative.
Zelensky has emphasized that human lives are far more important than any Russian parades.
The president of Ukraine considers a two-day truce unserious, so he announced the start of a ceasefire regime and reciprocal measures on the front line. In other words, there will be silence only if it is observed by the other side as well.
The Ukrainian side is taking what is called a strategic preemptive move, that is, shifting the entire time frame of the proposed truce.
But what is most important? Now leadership is in Ukraine's hands, and Russia could end up trapping itself.
If the Russian Federation agrees to Ukraine's proposals, then it is Ukraine that is establishing the opportunity for a ceasefire and, moreover, carefully evaluating and testing the very nature of that ceasefire. If the Russian Federation refuses to reach an agreement, then Ukraine has every legitimate legal right at the moment of initiating its military strikes, at the time of the so-called military parade in Moscow.
Thus, Russia has a real opportunity to secure the much-desired calm and control on May 9th. But only if they accept the terms proposed by Kyiv.
And then give them a chance to rest? We don't have any days off. We apologize because of Russia and because of their unprovoked attack. So we give them a day off, and the next morning after the 9th, they will start killing us once again. Let us see how this situation unfolds.
Meanwhile, threats are also being made. Along with the two-day ceasefire announcement, the Russian Ministry of Defense also issued threats.
And the Russian Ministry of Defense immediately threatened to strike Kyiv if their parade is disrupted.
Is the bunker dweller really so afraid to come out on May 9th that the Kremlin couldn't come up with any other words?
Well, at this point, there's hardly anything that can scare the Ukrainian side anymore. There have already been strikes with the Oreshnik, constant attacks using ballistic and cruise missiles.
But it turns out that, unexpectedly, these Russian scare tactics have dealt a blow to Putin's own reputation.
These official statements sounded very much like an explicit and direct warning to the Ukrainian side and its leadership, cautioning them not to attempt to launch any strikes during the military parade in the capital city. And even Russians themselves are asking, so it turns out that tanks and accordingly columns of cadets are more important to the Russian dictator than the bombings of Belgorod and Bryansk. Why were there no corresponding threats from the Russian Federation at the time the strikes were carried out? For the same reason.
But that's not the end of it. Another risk factor is emerging. the threat of launching the Orishnik. After all, Russia closed the airspace over the Kapustin Yar testing range from May 5th to May 8th.
If we're talking about the possibility of using the Oreshnik before the parade takes place, then what about the corresponding statement from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, which said that in the event of a Ukrainian strike during the parade, all forces and means of the Russian Federation would be used for a retaliatory strike on Ukrainian territory? At the very least, there's an inconsistency.
And now everything depends on Russia, because Zelensky's recent statement about drones over Moscow could become a reality.
For many, many years, they haven't been able to allow the presence of weaponry at the parade, and Ukrainian drones could also show up at this parade.
Russia was counting on imposing its own ceasefire for specific dates and on its own terms. But Kyiv seized the initiative and broke the imposed scenario. And now the choice is up to Russia.
We have changed the paradigm of the war. Now it is no longer Ukrainians who fear possible strikes by the Russian Federation on Ukrainian territory.
Dates that are sacred to Russians. Now it is Russians who look at the calendar, and when they see dates that are sacred to them, they are horrified to realize that this could be a reason for a strike on the territory of the Russian Federation.
The Caucasus is turning toward the west. Zelensky is turning the game around. Yerevan and Baku are raising a fist over Putin's head. The meeting with Pashinyan in Yerevan and the recent tough agreements with Aliyev are not just diplomacy. They are a coordinated blow to Moscow's ambitions. How is the Caucasus pulling the ground out from under the dictator's feet? Watch. A geopolitical shift. Armenia, which for decades depended on the Kremlin for security, is now hosting leaders from all over Europe. The first ever bilateral EU-Armenia summit was successfully convened in Yerevan. This event followed the 8th summit of the European Political Community, which was recently hosted in the country.
For that introduction, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you and President Costa for the very kind invitation to this summit.
The EU summit in Yerevan demonstrates that the European security model is replacing ineffective structures like the CSTO. The post-Soviet space is no longer an internal affair of the Kremlin.
It has become increasingly evident and clear to everyone living in Armenia, especially following the most recent Armenian-Azerbaijani war, that Russia was fully prepared to abandon Armenia without showing any significant concern or hesitation and would ultimately do nothing to assist it. And this realization marked a definitive turn in Armenia's orientation toward the West and toward Europe. The recent summit of the European community serves, in a way, as a powerful and undeniable testament to this strategic direction in Armenia's development for the foreseeable and immediate future ahead.
The presence of Volodymyr Zelensky at the summit and his direct participation in the event is a clear declaration that the era of Russian dominance in the Caucasus is over, and the Kremlin's old methods of control no longer work. The president of Ukraine also held a meeting with Armenia's Prime Minister Pashinyan.
Well, it is increasingly evident that Armenia is now shifting its strategic orientation toward Europe, which is a key partner of Ukraine rather than toward Russia. Therefore, in principle, it is even ready to go so far as to invite the president of Ukraine to Armenia, which many in Russia perceived as something of a deliberate and provocative insult, a sharp slap in the face to their long-standing sense of imperial grandeur. Various Z propagandists and so-called war correspondents, of course, were furious, fiercely demanding that the Russian peacekeepers in Gyumri, there are 5,000 of them there, immediately attack Zelensky and capture him. And so on in that vein. Well, naturally, none of this is serious, but it is a slap in the face. Well, obviously, they won't acknowledge it publicly.
Russian influence in the South Caucasus is rapidly declining. The Kremlin is losing its position as a key player, and the region is actively reorienting itself toward new allies.
In a region where it had been present for an incredibly long period of time, ever since the historical reign of Peter the Great, they have been consistently trying to establish firm control over this entire region. But now it turns out that their traditional influence there is diminishing at a very rapid pace. And it's falling even among significant states that are hostile to each other, such as the nations of Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Let us recall that on April 25th, Vladimir Zelensky made his first visit in years of full-scale war to Azerbaijan. The parties solidified agreements in the areas of security, energy, and the defense industrial complex.
There was cooperation even before the period of full-scale invasion. After the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it only intensified. Ukraine has always recognized the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has always recognized the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. And now the possibilities for military, technical, and other forms of cooperation with Azerbaijan are being discussed quite actively. For Ukraine, Azerbaijan is a potentially very important partner, just as Ukraine is important for Azerbaijan.
Relations between Azerbaijan and Russia are in a state of profound crisis of trust. Volodymyr Zelensky's visit became a powerful catalyst for this deterioration, although tensions had been building for years.
We can see how relations between Azerbaijan and Russia are deteriorating right now. And even though Russia apologized and paid compensation for the downed plane, and Azerbaijan accepted all of this, it cannot be said that this immediately restored relations to their previous level. In other words, Azerbaijan is clearly distancing itself from Russia and is obviously looking to new partners.
Russia's status as a great power is a thing of the past. Today, the Kremlin is nothing more than a minor secondary player in global affairs, continually forced to adapt to harsh realities over which it no longer has any significant or meaningful influence. It has happened. Putin has fallen into a trap. His own security detail is preparing his elimination. The dictator hardly ever appears in public, afraid of his own shadow. And this is not just fear. Intelligence reports indicate a real conspiracy within his inner circle. What is this? Paranoia or the countdown to Putin's life? Watch. It seems the Russian dictator has now even become afraid of his own shadow.
Putin has gone too far.
While the blue screen pours stories of an external enemy into people's ears, a much more dangerous process is unfolding within Russia itself, the struggle for power.
It has often been said that the truly greatest addiction of all is to power. I have honestly never felt that way in my entire life. I have never been a dependent person at all, not on any person or anything. To expect or to truly believe that once you have climbed your way into some powerful boss's chair, it should somehow belong to you for the rest of your life, all the way until the grave, is something that I find to be absolutely and completely unacceptable in every possible way.
Important Stories has obtained an intelligence report from one of the European Union countries about the real situation in the Kremlin and the condition of Vladimir Putin.
Since the beginning of March 2026, the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin have been concerned about the leakage of sensitive information, as well as the risk of a conspiracy or an attempted coup against the president of Russia. In particular, he is concerned about the possible use of drones for a highly targeted assassination attempt by members of the Russian political elite.
That is, from the very people on whom the entire power vertical relied just yesterday.
I am convinced that the most terrifying period is beginning in Russia.
The Federal Protective Service has effectively isolated the bunker dweller from the outside world, turning his movements into a special operation with elements of total control.
Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Putin has often taken refuge in modernized bunkers, particularly in the Krasnodar region, where he can work for weeks at a time, while Russian media continue to use pre-recorded video materials.
Now every visitor to the administration undergoes a double security check with a full inspection, and the list of places Putin is allowed to go has been sharply reduced. He no longer appears in his usual residences, nor even at symbolic sites that were previously used to demonstrate control over the country. Trips to military facilities have also disappeared. If last year they were part of the public image of control, now the dictator does not appear there at all.
In certain districts of Moscow, communication networks are periodically shut down. Federal Protective Service officers conduct extensive inspections using K9 units. And they are also stationed along the banks of the Moskva River, ready to react to any possible drone attacks.
Even information is being brought under control. Any public materials featuring Putin now must undergo a strict approval process. And employees working near the Kremlin leader are strictly prohibited from using regular phones. They are required to use specialized devices without internet access, travel exclusively in official FSO vehicles, and surveillance systems are installed within their homes. And against this backdrop, a key figure appears in the report, the former Minister of Defense and current Secretary of the Security Council, Sergei Shoigu.
For the 100th time, I want to express my sincere gratitude to Minister Shoigu, General Gerasimov, all of Shoigu's deputies, and all of Gerasimov's deputies. These are truly wonderful people who have systematically plundered this foolish Russian country and its foolish Russian army. They have looted it so thoroughly, they have made our task so much easier.
It is precisely Shoigu, whom European intelligence considers a potential destabilizing factor and therefore a possible source of threat to Putin himself.
I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out tomorrow that someone like Shoigu was working for Ukraine.
The arrest of his closest associate, Ruslan Salikov, was also telling. And after the murder of Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvarov, this rift came to the surface. Instead of a unified response, the security forces began openly shifting responsibility onto each other. At a closed meeting, General Staff Chief Gerasimov blamed special services for security lapses. The FSB blamed the military. The National Guard claimed no duty to protect the Defense Ministry, and Putin personally intervened to resolve the conflict.
After the meeting, Vladimir Putin met with the director of the Federal Protective Service, Dmitry Kochnev, whose primary responsibility is to ensure the physical security of the country's top leaders. It was decided to change the internal regulations of the Federal Protective Service, expanding the list of individuals under enhanced protection by this agency.
Moreover, according to sources, the FSO officers themselves are behind the mass internet outages in Moscow, and surveillance resources have now been redirected from external threats to internal ones. They are wiretapping the government, agencies, and officials. And as the cherry on top, this year not a single State Duma deputy received an invitation to the May 9th parade.
Well, that's really the end.
The system, which for years was held together by fear, is beginning to devour itself. Russia's resources are shrinking, risks are growing, and security guarantees no longer work. And now everyone within this hierarchy understands the next target could be them. If Moscow breaks the ceasefire, the AFU has a fiery gift ready. The Red Square parade is in the crosshairs. While Moscow is scrambling air defenses, Ukrainian soldiers are targeting the Kremlin. The AFU has begun its parade rehearsal. Ukraine's iron fist is tightening above the dictator's head. More details to follow.
They say there are three things you can watch endlessly: the flames of a fire, flowing water, and the launch of a Flamingo missile. Ukrainian long-range missiles successfully struck the Progress Research and Production Association plant, which is located at a significant distance of more than 1,000 kilometers away from the border. The Progress Research and Production Association plant is of vital strategic importance for Russia, as it produces a wide variety of components for the missiles that Putin uses to attack Ukrainian cities.
Operators from the first separate center, with the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense and other components of the Security and Defense Forces, conducted a combined strike on the Progress Research and Production Association facility in Cheboksary. The facility manufactures GNSS receivers and antennas for GLONASS, GPS, and Galileo systems, including Cometa navigation modules that are resistant to electronic warfare. These modules are used in Caliber missiles Kh-69, Iskander-M, S-8000 Banderol, as well as in UAVs such as Shahed, Orlan 10, and 4-Post. In addition, Cometa is part of planning and correction modules that turn aerial bombs into guided munitions. Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense.
It seems that the Flamingo missile is now fully in service with the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and such strikes will become systematic.
The Flamingo missile, also known as the FP5. It's a highly effective missile, and by all accounts, it has now been officially adopted into service. And this is a critically serious and defining element of what I would call a significant and evolving new reality in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And this new reality comes down to the fundamental fact that sustained shelling and strategic long-range strikes deep in the rear of Russia, occurring practically across the entire European part of the territory of the Russian Federation, are now becoming something of a routine occurrence and routine everyday circumstances.
The Russian authorities reported nearly 300 strike drones shot down in 18 regions of the Russian Federation. Almost the entire European part of Russia was in an uproar. This is how one of the Z bloggers reacted, who now lives in the Urals and previously fought in Ukraine as part of the Storm Z formation, to the overnight attacks by the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
For once, as a resident of a backwater city, I'm hearing these sounds. Cops are patrolling with announcements. Attention, missile danger. Looks like Putin's special operation is losing its appeal.
Even local deputies are unhappy about the strikes on Chuvashia. They've basically started openly criticizing Putin and his so-called special military operation.
The recent series of drone strikes on the capital of Chuvashia, on Cheboksary, are a direct consequence of current politics. The ongoing special military operation and the tragic deaths of our fellow countrymen. All of that is deeply rooted in politics. Even the rising costs of utility tariffs are a form of politics too. In reality, absolutely everything that affects our daily lives is politics. So, I urge you to use your brains, look around, and think critically about what is truly happening across the entire country right now.
It's not just about the factory in Cheboksary. Ukrainian forces also managed to strike an oil refinery that is among the 5 largest in Russia. Ukrainian drones visited the Leningrad region and struck the Kirishi oil refinery.
Operators of the first separate center, together with the Special Operations Forces and the Security Service of Ukraine, in coordination with other Special Operations Forces, struck the Kirishi Kyiv oil refinery in the Leningrad region. The plant has a capacity of 20 to 21 million tons of oil per year, making it one of the 3 largest refineries in the aggressor country. The plant is part of the Surgutneftgaz structure and specializes in deep oil processing as well as the production of fuel, bitumen, and aromatic hydrocarbons. Kyiv is an important element of Russia's export logistics in the Baltic region. The main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
The complete Russian oil structure and infrastructure from extraction to export is currently under a very serious impact, what is commonly referred to in military circles as direct enemy action, which of course also causes deep irritation and an intense sense of wild rage in Moscow.
It seems that the concerns expressed by Vladimir Putin about the May 9th parade are certainly not without some justification. And Ukrainian drone forces might deliver a very unwelcome gift on Red Square on the so-called Victory Day. And not only in Moscow, and it is already quite clear that the new Ukrainian weapons, particularly the Flamingo missiles and systematic strikes, are becoming a formidable and strategic trump card in Ukraine's hands.
Urgent. Fico changed his stance at the last minute. A loud statement shook the EU. The Prime Minister of Slovakia officially confirmed he is flying to Moscow to meet with Putin. But here lies the main mystery. He categorically refused to attend the victory parade of triumphalism. Betrayal or a cunning plan? Who is really pulling Fico's strings? Watch.
Could it be that the old friendship has started to crack? And Putin is losing key allies? Just the other day, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, made his close friend, the Russian dictator Putin, worry. After an unexpected meeting with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, in Yerevan, Fico announced that he would visit Moscow on May 9th and meet with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, but at the same time would not take part in the military parade dedicated to Victory Day. He has officially stated that he is only planning to lay flowers at the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Regarding the visit to Moscow, again, there is no particularly aggressive rhetoric. That is, he says, yes, he will go meet with Putin, but he will not participate in the parade.
I will lay flowers at the grave of the unknown soldier of the Red Army to thank them on behalf of Slovak women and men for the liberation. And I have a brief meeting scheduled with President Putin. That's all. I will not attend any military parade.
Meanwhile, Fico defended his Russia trip despite criticism from the European Commission.
I will not allow myself to be put in a situation where I would have any pangs of conscience.
I meet with Putin and everyone criticizes me, but when I return after meeting with him in the corridors of Brussels in the restrooms, everyone asks me what he said. Although just last week, Putin's aide Yuri Ushakov assured everyone that the Slovak Prime Minister would be at the parade on May 9th.
Ushakov confirmed that Fico, along with other foreign guests, would be at the victory parade in Moscow.
Analyst Peter Oleszczuk believes likely not Fico's plans changed, but rather the Kremlin's.
Aside from Fico, no one else was planning to go to Moscow at that time. I can assume that the Kremlin itself didn't really want Fico to be present at the parade because, well, it would look strange. Last year, there were a large number of various world leaders, including the leader of China, but today it's just Fico, and so what? And what is that supposed to demonstrate? A decline in authority and prestige.
And in fact, Fico himself wasn't really eager to attend the parade.
He is fully conscious of the significant potential security threats associated with conducting this specific parade. And he understands exactly how the Russian leadership is deeply worried about the parade's safety. And obviously Fico doesn't need any of this.
Today, Fico is trying to sit on two chairs after the weakening of his ally Viktor Orban's position in Hungary.
Fico now obviously has found himself unexpectedly caught in a rather peculiar situation, where he is widely perceived by almost everyone as the most sympathetic pro-Russian head of state of a European country. It seems quite apparent that he doesn't feel very comfortable in this role, because previously Orban bore the brunt of the international criticism, constantly making some pro-Russian statements, and Fico would just join in. So as it were, he wasn't the primary target of public scrutiny. He quietly reaped various strategic benefits from Russia, but Orban took the main blows. And for Fico, obviously, that was very, very comfortable.
At the same time, analysts note Fico's attempts to shift his policy to a more moderate one,
because he is primarily motivated by a desire to generate significant financial profits with the Russians, to secure various strategic advantages and preferences from them, but he absolutely does not want to draw all the negative attention of those who harbor strong feelings of animosity toward either Putin or Russia onto himself. That is exactly why he is now trying to maneuver. At least for a short while, his rhetoric will likely become much less radical, and he will make fewer overtly pro-Russian statements, simply waiting to see, essentially, how the entire situation will develop further from here.
Interestingly, in addition to everything else, Fico has changed his position and rhetoric not only regarding the parade, but also towards Ukraine.
Recently, he has made several statements that are not anti-Ukrainian, but on the contrary, are actually favorable towards Ukraine. In particular, he no longer objects to Ukraine joining the European Union. At the same time, Fico hasn't changed at all. He remains the same unprincipled pro-Russian politician he always was, but he has always been more cautious, especially since he clearly sees Orban's fate. He understands that there will also be threats to his own political future. Right now, many are saying that Fico is planning to hold early parliamentary elections. It is possible that, once again, he simply has no desire to, let us say, unnecessarily provoke a series of public scandals regarding all of these complex issues, and instead, he simply wants to calmly prepare himself for the upcoming early elections in order to retain his power.
Shock. Hell in Zaporizhia. Malaya Tokmachka became a mass grave for the Russian elite. Again, the Kremlin claimed famed Malaya Tokmachka, but reality is grim. Intel shows the truth. This place has turned into a death zone for Russia, from which there is no return. Ukraine's forces prepare the final chord. Our intel has a big surprise for the Russians there. Details in the report.
A new settlement in Zaporizhia is on the front pages of all the news outlets. Yet another significant failure for the occupiers on the front occurred near Mala Tokmachka. There are quite a few cities and towns in eastern Ukraine where Putin's army has been breaking its teeth for years, but this one deserves special attention, as the number of fake liberations by the Russians is already countless. Belousov announced a significant step toward victory in the special military operation. The Minister of Defense congratulated the Russian military on the liberation of Mala Tokmachka. At the same time, in the Russian Ministry of Defense, this settlement is seriously considered at the general staff level to be the key to the complete defeat of the Ukrainian Armed Forces at the front. The Minister of Defense himself said exactly that. Mala Tokmachka, he claimed, is a significant step toward achieving the goals of the special operation. Without any sarcasm, recently people have started talking about Mala Tokmachka because of the memes that this settlement has generated online. The thing is, on propaganda shows, a certain pseudo-expert named Rodjin has been starting his military reports with it for about a year now. And every time the Russians are supposedly just about to take control of it. Journalists didn't get lazy and put together this kind of compilation.
Good evening. What news do you have?
Good evening. Speaking about the situation on the front line, in the Zaporizhia direction, our troops have achieved certain successes in the area of Mala Tokmachka. There is still fighting on the outskirts of Mala Tokmachka, and battles are currently continuing throughout the entire surrounding area, while the fight for the town of Mala Tokmachka itself continues to persist even now. Our troops also made small advances southeast of Mala Tokmachka. Fighting continues for the southern and southeastern parts of Mala Tokmachka as the assault on the town persists. There are also advances in the area, and fighting continues to rage throughout the broader Mala Tokmachka region.
And this is despite the fact that officially Mala Tokmachka has long been declared liberated, and Putin even congratulated those involved. In reality, however, most of the village is under the control of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. About a third is in the gray zone, and only on the eastern outskirts have the Russians managed to barely hold on to some houses on the edge. The fighting is non-stop and it is bloody. Pounding the same positions and the Russian army's attempts to infiltrate the front line with small infantry groups result in the deaths of hundreds of Russian soldiers every day. This happens in various ways, but mostly through the use of FPV drones. However, Ukrainian scouts often visit those very houses as well. Naturally, they don't come empty-handed.
We tossed a TM mine into the designated spot and blew up the basement.
Amusingly, even people in the Z community can no longer listen to the triumphant reports on Channel 1. They have openly stated that after more than a full year of attempts to seize this small village, thousands of soldiers have already died without achieving any real results.
Today we're basically operating in small groups, right? And there, the question is, can we liberate Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Kharkiv, Zaporizhzhia, or successfully cross the Dnipro with these small groups? Can we do this in pairs or not? And if not, and now here's the question, is it really worth losing dozens of pairs every single day if we can't?
By the way, the Russian command did attempt to capture Mala Tokmachka with a large-scale assault. At the beginning of spring, they sent several armored groups and dozens of contract soldiers into the attack at once. As a result, this has so far become the most high-profile failure of the Russian offensive in 2026.
The Ukrainian 118th and 65th Brigades, supported by other units, knocked out 2 tanks, 12 IFVs, 6 APCs and 2 Tiger armored vehicles. That is 22 vehicles out of 26. A complete rout. Not even the powerful shaggy armor in the latest style helped.
The reason for such desperate attempts by the enemy is clear, according to the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command. This is the road to the strategically important settlement of Orikhiv. That is why multiple layers of defensive lines and reinforced fortified areas were constructed here, which allowed Mala Tokmachka to become a symbol of a strategic dead end for the Russians in the Zaporizhzhia region.
That's all for now. But for more breaking news from the front, tune in to the next episode